Hello and welcome to the Argos Report Writer training. My name is Chris and I'll be leading this training today. For training purposes, we will be recording all training sessions and make some of them available for download from our support site. If you want to review our recorded trainings, please download them from the website and you can follow at your own pace. The intended audience for the training is the Argos Report Writer. The prerequisite to this training is the Argos Report Viewer training, or a basic understanding of the Argos product. The goal of this training is to demonstrate the functionalities available to the report writer and how to create each of the 4 types of reports in Argos. We will be covering the following objectives in this training: an overview of what the report writer role is, the differences between a shared report and a private report, how to create each type of report, how to add filters, sorts, and expressions to the report, and how to add objects from the Library of Objects tool. First, we're going to provide an overview of what the report writer does. To create a report, there are 3 things we will need: a data block form, the report query, and a report format. As a report writer, we use the information coming from the data block and create the report format for the report viewers to see. So as a report writer, we're dependent on the information coming in the data block to create our reports. For example, here we have created a report from a data block returning students that have an outstanding balance and have a past due balance on their account. We like this report format and we want to return all students that have an outstanding balance, even if they are not past due. For this, we would need a completely separate data block because we are accessing a broader population. Another example would be if we wanted to use a new data element to the report, such as a phone number. Again, we would require an entirely new data block, this time because the data elements have changed. Even though we're still working with the same population, we would need to modify our query for the new data element, in this case, adding a student phone number. This ultimately comes down to communication. Discussion will be necessary between the 3 parties that are involved in the report creation process. This will ensure that the created report contains all of the required data elements. When creating a report, we can have the data block designer create a data block that is multifunctional, as it can sometimes be difficult to go back and modify a data block after it has been created. Okay, then next we're going to discuss the difference between a shared and a private report. Let's get started and launch Argos through the eLauncher webpage. And I'm going to start by logging on as a report viewer. If you look at my screen, you'll notice that my role is showing as a report viewer. And under my report writer data block, there are 4 reports available: the dashboard, extract, CSV, and banded. I'm going to sign out and sign back in as my writer. Notice that we now see another report. It's slightly different than the others because there's an I superimposed over the icon. This indicates that this is a private report and can only be seen by the person who made the report private. Only roles that can edit a report are able to make reports private. A good use for a private report is to make it private while you, the report writer, are developing the report. When the report is ready to go into production, change the security setting to shared so that everyone can see it. The next concept I want to go over is informational only. As a report writer, you cannot implement it, but I do want you to be aware of it. Let's say you have a report that is wanted by different people in different departments, and they all want pretty much the same information. The information is not sensitive in nature, so a report is created for everyone to use. Later, one group needs a piece of information, and that piece of information is sensitive in nature. This could be something like a social security number, a disability indicator, or an indicator that someone is getting financial aid. This information should only be viewed by users with the proper permissions. The data block designer role has the ability to restrict access to a piece of data based on who runs the report. Let's say the last name is private information. The data block designer will grant access to the last name field only to people who are in the Human Resources department. When the report is run by a member of Human Resources, the report will include information under the last name field. When the report is run by anyone outside of HR, the report will not contain information under the last name field and will show as blank. This gives you a lot of flexibility to broaden the users of a report, but again, this necessitates communication with your data block designer to create the required report. Next, we will be creating each of the different types of reports. So, we create a new report by highlighting the data block and clicking on the New button under Report Writer Actions. This pops up a Create New Report or Dashboard window. Here we will give the report a name, set the permissions to shared or private, give the report a description, and select what type of report it will be. While the first item in this list is a dashboard, this selection will just create a new shortcut to the dashboard that was created by the data block designer. We're going to focus on the other three reports, which are the actual reports that can be created. That is our CSV, our extract, and our banded report. We're going to start with a comma delimited report. And let's give this report a name. Type in a description. The best practice is to fill this in as descriptively as possible. After we've created a number of different reports, we'll need to be able to differentiate them. Remember that the report viewers are the ones who need to know what the report does, so a good description here can save a lot of time. I've selected the CSV type, and I'll click Create. This automatically takes us to the Edit Report window, and you can see we have 6 tabs along the top. The General, Filters, Sort, Refresh, API, and Saved Execution States. I'm going to talk about filters and sorts in more detail after I've created the report. The Refresh tab will allow you to refresh the variables within the data block. The API tab is used by Argos administrators to set up API calls. And the Saved State tab is used for managing saved states. If you want to find out more information about any of these different tabs, you can press F1, and that will launch the in-product help for this topic. At any time that you're working Argos, pressing F1, which I do now, will bring you into the in-product help in the appropriate section. I'm going to go back to my General tab. Oh, sorry, excuse me, one moment. and I'm going to click Design. Here is a design window for the CSV report. You'll notice it has the title of my report at the top of the design window. And remember, here we're creating a CSV, which is a flat text file, so the design work is going to be fairly minimal. First, we would select the fields for our report, which are listed in the left-hand pane. These are the database fields returned from the data block query. If we need a field that isn't in this list, we would need to work with our data block designer to get it added. We can select our fields in one of two ways. We can double-click on the field to add it. We can also use the Control key on our keyboard, or the Shift key to make multiple selections, and then use the arrows to move them over. The double arrow is going to move over all of the fields. To remove a field from the report, highlight them and click on the X. For this example, I'm going to add last name, first name, street 1, city, state, and zip. If I want to reorder the columns in my CSV, I can highlight the field and use the blue arrows. I can also rename a field heading by double-clicking, or by selecting it and clicking the ABI icon. When you rename a column header, you can use spaces in the name. And please note that we are just renaming the header that will appear in the CSV. We're not renaming the actual field. For this example, I'm going to rename Street 1 to just read Street. So far, we've just added fields to our CSV report, but we can also add expressions. By clicking on the E=MC² button, this brings up my expression builder, which will help me in building my expression. The FN icon is going to show me a list of available functions. The ABC icon is a list of available user-defined variables. And the signal icon is a list of dataset fields. For a simple demonstration, I'm going to add an expression returning the report date. I can either look through all the available functions or just a specific subset. Since I'm wanting to add the date, I know this is in the date and time category. And here are all the available date and time functions. As I click on each function, you can see it shows a description at the bottom. I'm going to choose the Now function to return the current system date and time, and click OK. And in my expression builder, I can see the Now function is showing my expression is complete, and I'm just going to click OK. This is asking me for a field name. I'm going to call it date and time, and click OK. At the bottom right-hand side of this panel, we can see we have a few more options for our CSV report. Right column header, this option is checked by default, and it will add a column header as the first row of your CSV report. The headers will be the name of the data fields, as seen in this right-hand pane. There's the option to include a byte order mark. Some programs, such as Microsoft Excel, require a byte order mark in the file to render extended ASCII characters correctly. You should check this box if there may be foreign characters in the data, and you will be opening the CSV file in such a program. Suppress printing of repeated lines. This was a new feature added in version 5.2 and above of Argos. This option removes duplicate lines from the report. The duplicates will only be removed if they are appearing sequentially. Any duplicates that appear further down the report would not be suppressed. To remove all duplicates from the report, please make sure to sort the records so that the duplicates will be grouped together. Append blank line to the end of the report. This will add a blank line to the end of the report if desired. And finally, the separator. Here you would enter the character you wish to use as the field separator. Standard CSV reports use a comma, and this is going to be the default in Argos. I'm going to leave all of these as the default, and let's see how the report looks. OK, and OK. And I'm going to run my report. I don't have any saved settings, so here's our CSV report with the columns that we selected. We can see that the street column has been renamed, and the date and time column is the furthest to the right. Before I close out, notice that we have addresses from a variety of different states, and that the records are being sorted by last name and then by first name. If we want to narrow our results, we can filter by a field or sort by a field in the report. Let's close out of here and go back into edit my report. And sorry, one moment, I do have a question coming in. How are user-defined functions captured? How complex can they be? And are they stored anywhere? That is a fairly complicated question and probably more than I would want to go into in this session. If I could have you open up a help desk ticket for that, that's something one of our analysts would definitely be able to go into with more detail for you. As I say, there's just a lot going on in there, and it would depend exactly how you were wanting to do it and what you were wanting to set up. So let's go back into edit our report for now. So filters and sorts are part of editing the report. Once activated, they can be deactivated by a report writer role or above. To activate a filter or sort, you would check the activate box. Something that should be noted is filters set up in the Report Filter tab run after all of the filters and conditions coming from your data block report query. If used, the Filter tab is essentially tacking on additional conditions to the existing data block. In the case of large record sets, this will add additional processing time. Sorts set up in the Report Sort tab will completely bypass any sort order defined in the data block and use the report sort order instead. I'm going to start by adding a filter to my report. And let's use an example of the state of Pennsylvania. So to add a filter, first you click the button at the top, which I did, and you can then double click or drag to choose the filter you want to use. Then we'll type in the filter. Since we only want to use Pennsylvania, I'm going to add a space, an equal sign, another space, single quote, PA, and another single quote. One moment, I have another question coming in. I noticed that on the CSV report, the zip code column removed the leading zeros. Can the report generator be set up so that the zip code includes leading zeros? That would be set up when the report query was being created. So if the query set up by the data block designer includes leading zeros, it will appear in the report. So back on this, we could type this out for each new state, but a much easier way of doing it would be using a SQL function. Let's clear this out for now. If you are familiar with SQL, many SQL functions will work here. We will be using the in function to include all of our user input. So I want it to be in Pennsylvania, California. Next, I'm going to work on my sort tab. We'll start by activating the override. And I'm going to want to sort by, let's see, state, and then by city. Let's see how this report has turned out now. Notice that here we only have addresses from the states of California and Pennsylvania, and that the report is sorted first by state and then by city. States that aren't showing up just aren't part of the record set we're using. If we set up our reports properly the first time, changes to the record set later will show up when the report is run. I'm going to pause for a moment here just in case there are any additional questions. So what I'm getting asked here is, when do we need to choose the address type when we run the report? If you're referring to selecting from this box here, that's just how my dashboard has been set up to run. So if I don't select an address type, the report query isn't going to have anything to work off of. Depending on the type of report that you're creating would determine what information you do or do not need to select on a dashboard report such as this. Okay, let's move on from the CSV, and we're going to take a look at extract reports. So an extract report is also a flat text report similar to a CSV, but it's been designed to meet predefined output specifications. It can also create a comma-delimited output that is more complex than a CSV file, and can be used to create fixed width and XML files. So we are going to create an extract report that will output into a fixed width format. Start by clicking New for my new report. This is my report writer training extract report. And I'm not going to fill in a description from out. Select extract and create. This brings us back to the edit report window where we can add our filters and sorts, the same as before. And let's go into the design area. So this is the extract report design window. Notice again we have the name of the report at the top, and it's divided into three sections. We have our report structure, our configure report, and our datasets. I'm going to talk about the dataset region first. The dataset region contains SQL queries that can return data for the report. The Argos data main dataset contains the data selected by the report query in the data block. You'll notice these are the same fields that were available in the CSV report. The other datasets will contain the results of other queries that are running in the dashboard. We could also use these as part of a report if we wished. All of these datasets will be populated either by the report query or elements in the dashboard set up by your data block designer. The middle area is where we configure each section, and we can start by configuring the main report settings. We can choose which type of report format we wish to use. That is our fixed width, a delimited, or an XML report. If we select delimited, first notice Argos will warn us that this will undo any information not stored for this action. You will lose all configuration data specific to the current format. For right now, I'll just click yes to continue. In a delimited extract report, notice there's a field called delimiter. The delimiter is the field used to separate data, most commonly used by a comma. In some cases, a tab can be used as the delimiter. This icon with the two arrows pointing opposite each other will insert a tab into the delimiter box. For this extract report, we're going to use fixed width. I just wanted to talk to you about the delimiter before moving on. To the left is the report structure area. Here we can add sections to our report. The detail record is the most important section within a report because it contains the record information being returned from the data source. One detail section contains the information for one record, and it will repeat for each record returned from the report. The report structure area is also where we would add sections for the comment object we saw in our report viewer training. If you would like more information on report formats, check out the in-product documentation. I'm going to start by adding a title section. In the middle configuration area, we can configure the section properties. Note that we have an option here to print conditionally by creating an expression. The Fields tab is where you would add the fields you want to include in the title section. You have the option to add a dataset field, an expression, an EZ expression, which allows us to use the most commonly used expressions, a constant, and a variable. We're going to add a couple of constants into our title section. The first constant is going to be our school name, so I'm going to rename this to school. I can set my width to 45. The width needs to be wide enough for any school name, and if we're designing this report to send to the government, you would need to follow their specifications. Next, I'm going to set the value, and this is going to be eVisions University. As I type my characters, you may have noticed that the width value has automatically adjusted to accommodate the value I entered. It's doing this because it's a constant field type. After entering my value, I can set the width back to 45. Oops. Add a second constant, and this is going to be my contact email. And again, set my width to 45. I also want to add an expression that's going to generate today's date. I'll do that with an expression field. So I'm going to call this report run date. I'm going to change my width to 10. I can change my width first because, unlike a constant, this is an expression and it will not auto-adjust. So next I need to create an expression to bring in today's date. I do that by clicking on the ellipses, and this brings up my expression builder. Similar to the CSV, I'm going to use the function button, date and time, and I'm going to use now, OK, and OK, and we can see my expression. To make sure that the date displays the way I want it, I can also apply a formatting mask. Because the width is 10 characters, I want a format that's going to return, well, 10 characters. So this one here of month, month, day, day, year, 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 with the forward slashes. That's going to be 10 characters long. Double click to apply, and click OK. So this is going to generate a date that is 10 characters wide, which is the width I've set for my field. Okay. Next, we're going to create a comment row that you may have seen when we were doing the report viewer training. We're going to add that as a child section. Okay, I am being asked, what does the date do without the formatting mask? It's just going to go to whatever the default date is set up to be, which I believe is usually just month, month, date, date, year, year, rather than the 4-year format. Just to retouch on the formatting mask, it can also be used for some other common number functions as well. Up at the top here, it explains what everything is going to do. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm going to add my comments, and I'm going to add it as a child section because I want it to immediately follow the title. Go back to my properties, and I'm going to rename this comments so I can see what it's going to be in my report structure. Go back to my fields, and I can now select my comments variable. Which one was that? There we go, sorry, it's this one. Okay. I'm going to set my width to be 100. And now any comments that are typed into the comments box on my dashboard are going to be included in this report. I'm going to move on and add my detail section. We can rename this section in the section property tabs, change the associated dataset if required, but I'm okay with it just being called detail, and I want to use the Argos dataset. Let's go to fields and add fields onto my report. You can double click on the dataset fields or drag and drop over onto the report. I want ID, last name, first name, city, state, and zip. Now that I've added them, I can configure the width based on my report specifications. Remember that the width of a field defines the number of characters that will be displayed. So if I set last name to 25, and someone's last name is longer than that, it is going to be truncated. I want my ID to be 15. My last name of 25 is fine. 15 for my first name. 35 for city. 4 for state. And 10 for zip. Now that I have my report set up how I want it, let's take a look and see how it looks. Unlike in the CSV report, we have a test button at the top of the toolbar. This will allow you to preview your extract report without leaving the design window. My parameter entry pops up. Fill this out again. And this time I'm also going to put something into my comments section. Note at the bottom left, There is a control that allows you to choose how many records you want to return. Setting this to 0 would return all records. While running a test report, I don't need to return all records. I just need to return enough to check out the design of my report. Let's set it to 100. That should be enough to preview. And click OK. So here is my report. We can see my title section with eVisions University, the email address, and today's run date. Here's my child band with the comments I entered in that memo box. And then the detail section returning one line for each entry returned. You can notice here where something in the last name has exceeded my limit and it has been cut off. Before we get started with creating a banded report, let's go over some basic concepts. It's called a banded report because the data is arranged into bands, and it's similar to an extract report, except in an extract report the data is arranged into sections. There's a great deal of similarity between the two different report styles, but they do work differently, and knowing how bands work is crucial to being able to build banded reports. The first band we need to talk about is the detail band. The detail band is the most important band within a report because it contains the record information being returned from the data source. One detail band contains the information for one record, and the detail band repeats for each record until the end of the report. While the rest of the bands we're going to talk about are optional, a report must have a detail band. The first of the optional bands is the page header. The page header prints at the top of each page. You can also have a page footer, and this will print at the bottom of each page. There is a title band, and the title will print only on the first page. Just like the title band, we also have a summary band, and that will only print on the last page. There are also column headers, which will print at the top of each page. The next band is a group band. There is a group header that defines the beginning of the band, and a group footer, which defines the end of the band. Grouping bands are bands that group detail records based on a definition. In a grouping band, the header band is required, but the footer is optional. The next band is a child band, which always prints after its parent. We have a child band here that follows our group header and contains our column labels. That's this light blue band here. And highlighted here because it's difficult to see, we also have a child band following, following after the group footer. In this case, it doesn't contain any data, but it is being used as a separator to separate the group footer from the following group header. The in-product documentation covers these definitions if you want to review in more detail. So now we're going to create a banded report. We'll create it in stages, but when we're finished, it should look something like this. One thing I should have mentioned while I was still in there. I'd like to point out this Design DPI dropdown at the bottom of the window. This option allows you to specify the DPI that the report was designed in. The report will then scale appropriately when viewed in systems with a different DPI setting. You may need to specify a DPI setting here for reports that were created in earlier versions of Argos, in order for the report to scale correctly, that is. New reports are automatically set to 96 when created. So to create a banded report, select my data block and click New. Give it a name. And choose banded and click Create. As with the other reports, I can set up filters and sorts, API, save states. But let's click. Actually, before we do that, let's do a sort, because I want to see the records in order by state. Then city, last name, first name. Then click Design. And here this brings up a banded report wizard. Question before I move on is, what version of Argos is the DPI adjustment available? That is a good question. Let me just check on that. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm just bringing up our Argos release notes, which is where you can find all this kind of information. Sorry, I'm doing this off on a different monitor. It looks like this was Argos 4.3 was when we added that functionality. So quite a few versions back, it's been there for a while. So this is the banded report wizard. Because banded reports are a little more complicated to work with, the wizard is here to help us get them created. It has two tabs, the report type and report style. We have the different types of template we can create, and if I click on them, we can see an example off to the side. So the list report, a tabular style report, a blank report, a form style, or mailing labels. If we had a specific template, we could also choose to add it from the library of objects. The library of objects is a collection of different types of objects that we can create and then use again in our reports. When running the banded report wizard, we can select templates and/or styles from the library of objects. A template would be a pre-built report that could contain images or preset fonts that you may want to use as the basis for all of your reports. A style is going to be a set of colours or fonts. I don't have any, oh, there you go, I do have a style set up in here if I wanted to use it. Although now I've clicked that, I don't want to use it, so let me just exit back out. Okay. So I'm going to select the list type and click on Next. So in the far left pane here now, it's showing the fields coming over from my data block. And you'll notice these are all the same ones that we've seen in the previous reports because they're all being populated by the same report query. I can double click or use the single arrow or the double arrows to move everything over. I can also move them back over if I've had ones I didn't want. I'm going to add last name, first name, and I want city, state, and zip. You may have noticed that the banded report resizes fields after adding them. Just to take zip back out. And if you note the size, it adjusts as they go in. After we get out of the report wizard, you can still add fields, so don't worry if you forget to add one during this part of the creation. and click Next. This next window allows you to choose some default bands. The bands can be added or removed once inside the editor as well. We can also choose to format our labels and datasets here. A new option available in version 5.2 and above is to format the bands, which will allow you to specify the default font options for each band. For now, I'm going to add a page footer band, and that's going to be used to hold my page number. On this page setting tab, you can change your report title, and you can also set up some settings such as the size, the page margins, orientation, number of columns per page. I'm fine with all the defaults here, so I'm going to click Finish. So this has created a very basic banded report at this time. I'll be discussing the toolbar options as we go through this banded report and use them. For now, I'm going to click Preview to see what my basic report looks like. Again, return 100. Okay. So this is our basic preview. It's looking pretty plain, but it will do as a good starting point. So before we get started with this, let's go over the banded report interface. As always, the name is at the top of my window. I'd like you to focus on the structure pane to the left. This was implemented in Argos 4.5. Before that, there was a drop-down that displayed all of the bands and objects. The structure pane is more organized and easier to search for bands and objects in the report. This shows all of the bands in the report and the objects that have been placed in each band. As we add content to our banded report, you'll notice that the structure pane will be filled up with additional bands and objects. The first thing I'm going to add is a date to my page header. For that, I will need a system variable. To add that, I'll use the icon with SYS. I'll click on the icon and then click on the band that I want it to be placed. When adding bands, these are added a little differently, but that will be covered a little later on. So I've clicked on my page header and I get an edit window. I want to add some wording, so report printed on and a colon, and I'm going to select date from my drop-down, leave my alignment as left, and I do want to auto-size the width, so it will adjust based on the date being returned. And drag this to my top left corner. Oops, a little outside my border there. So you may have noticed as I'm moving around, some blue guidelines do appear. This is telling you where the object is in alignment to other objects on the report. The next thing I'm wanting to add is a page number. I could use the sys variable again to get a simple page count, but I want to do something a little more complex and include the current page number as well. To do this, we're going to use an expression, and we get the expression by clicking on the E = MC² button, and then I'm going to click in my page footer. This brings up the expression wizard, which is slightly different than the expression builder seen in the CSV and extract reports. We have all the same options, we just don't have the picture icons. So let's see what we're going to do. I'm going to want something like page number of page count. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a function. This brings up the list of available functions as before. You could look through them all by clicking on the All button, but I happen to know that the one I'm looking for is in the Other subset, and it is page number. Again, notice you get a description of the function when you click on it. Okay, so continue. So now we have the page number in our expression. Next, I'm going to want to add some wording. I'm going to need to ensure that I put leading and trailing spaces and use the plus sign between each of the variables. So, page number, plus, there's my leading space of and my trailing space, another plus at the end, and this time I'm going to add another function, and I'm going to add page count. Okay, so now my expression reads page number, space of space, page count. To confirm the expression is constructed properly, I can use the validate button. Oh, that's the variable button. There's the validate button. Okay, so we can going to see it's going to return number, space of space, and then number. Because this isn't actually running with a proper report, it's not going to show sensible numbers, which is why you're seeing page 3 of 0, basically. So this is okay, but I think I'm going to want to add the word page in front of page number. Again, single quote, page, make sure to include a trailing space, plus my page number. And again, I can validate. Okay, so I'm now going to get page number of number. Okay, and okay, and okay. Actually, let's go back in here because I want to set my alignment to be centered. And make sure it auto sizes the width in case we get some very long page counts. Set this object to the top of my band. Come on. There we go. I can now resize this band to minimize the white space. You would have noticed when I resize the band, when I click on it, I do get control points, and that was how I was changing the size. We can also align objects vertically and horizontally by using the alignment tools. So I can click on this and just make sure it's aligned vertically and horizontally in the band. The next thing I'm going to want to do is to change my title band. My default title is New Report. To change that, I can just double-click the object. It's actually going to be an address list. In addition, you can also change the font style and size. Let's use Verdana. Regular's fine. Size 22. And let's make it blue. Okay. And okay. And I'm going to want this on the right-hand side of my title band. Oops. There should do it. The next thing I want in my title is going to be my logo. To add a picture, you could click on the icon that looks like a mountain scene. However, this should only be done the first time that you add an object into Argos. Argos is not designed to modify images, and if modifications are performed on an image, it may begin to pixelate. We want to prevent this, especially since a banded report is designed to be printed. We would recommend using a photo manipulation software, something like Adobe Photoshop, to resize the image first, and then add the image into the library of objects. We will discuss adding to the library of objects later in the training, but for now we're going to retrieve a logo from it. We're going to use the icon that looks like a book. And this brings up my library of objects. This is it's going to take you to your default folder when you click into it. If you have access to other folders, you will be able to select them. For now, I just want to select my eVisions logo and click OK. Oh, sorry. I hadn't selected my title band before I did that, that's why I didn't add it in. There we go. Oh, that's the old logo. Let's not use that one. Select my band again. And let's try this one. That's a little better. Resize my band so the logo fits in it. Okay. Now my title band is complete. The next thing we're going to work with is our labels. For these. First we'll select all the labels. We can do that by holding down Shift and multi-selecting. You can also hold down the Control key on your keyboard and draw a box, and that will select any of the labels that that box touches. Another option is you can select in the structure pane off to the side. So now we can set these labels to change in unison by clicking on Edit. We're going to set some properties here. So I want the font to be same as the band. I want to align left, color transparent, and I'm going to uncheck everything else. Okay. So now let's do a preview and see how the report is coming along. Notice that my search parameters are still entered, and this is because I've not left the design window. Okay, so this is looking a little better. Oh, I've still got a logo at the top. I'll need to remove that. I've got my logo and title. I've got my report printed on. And if I scroll down, I can see I've got my page count. Get rid of that. I'm being asked, can we edit margins, etc. after we commit? So the margin around the outside of this, yes, you can change that at any point. I just right-clicked in the side there. Just to show you that again, just move my cursor, right-click, and I can change my margins, columns, anything that was set up in the original setup here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start grouping the records by state. To group detail bands, we need a band group, and adding a band group to the report is a little bit different than adding a typical object. Excuse me. We would click on the, no, that's the settings. And that's not, I've just completely flustered myself, sorry. These are my band icons here. So you would click on the band icon first, and then click anywhere on the report, because the band is automatically placed. There are 4 types you can add in at this point. This is going to be just a single band, which is going to create a title band, a page header, or a summary band. We have a child band, a group band, and a sub-detail band. We're going to be adding a group band, and our property window pops up automatically. Prior to version 5.0, you would first need to click on the icon and then click on the report to add the band. The band is added to the report automatically and placed in the appropriate location in version 5 onwards. You would set the master dataset. I only have one, that's my main Argos data. If others had been created, they would appear in that drop-down. I do want to include a footer band, so I'm going to create a new one. The footer band is going to be used to hold the state count for each state in my report. With a band group, we need to define what we are grouping by. We can either group by a data field or by an expression. For here, we want to write an expression, or we could just define the database field we want to group by. Come in here, and let's go into the database field and our Argos data. So here we have a list of the available fields. We want to group by state, and click OK. And OK again. And we can see group by is going to use the state field now. I also want to make this band match the color that you may remember in the example. So go into my color here, and I've got a custom color saved, and OK. We want this band to reprint on each new page, and we want to use a top frame line for my header. I'm going to select my footer now, and I'm going to make that a different colour so it stands out from the header. And again, I've got a custom colour to use here, and I'm going to give the frame a bottom line. So now we have a group band header and footer. Over here, notice called header 1 and footer 1. Those names don't really mean too much. I want to call them something a little more meaningful. Click in the group header. Oops, sorry. Highlight the group header, and I actually want to click on Edit the options for the selected object. This is going to be my state group header. And do the same state group footer. So now at a glance on my structure, I can see what these are. Now that we've got the header and footer, let's take a look and see how the report's coming along. All right, so we can see that this is grouping by my states. Notice that these bands are jutting right up against each other. This is where you could place a child band to add some separation between the groups. Also notice that because each record is printing the state, this confirms that it is grouping the way I want, but I no longer need to print the state for each record returned. Instead, I could put a state identifier into my header. So let's make those changes. First thing I want to do is add a child band. And this is going to follow my state group footer. You can see now why renaming the bands can be useful. That's the only setting I want to change. So I'm going to click OK. And because this is just being used as a spacer, let's edit. So this is my state group child. And I can make the height 0.15. Okay, let's just quickly take a look at that. And now we can see there is a space coming in between the footer and the header. Okay, so now I'm going to want to complete my header. I'm going to start by selecting my labels. And I want to move these from my column header into my group header. Notice that if I try and drag and drop, it's not going to allow me to do that. The reason for this is that each band is essentially its own entity. You can move objects from one band to another by using a copy-paste. So let's highlight them again. Actually, I want to cut and paste into my column header. I no longer need state to be in there, so I can delete that out. I'm being asked, should my report be grouped by state first? That is entirely up to you and how you want your report to be formatted. On this one, I'm grouping by state, just because that's the best example with the data set I have. So my report is going to group by the state in the bands, and then within each band it's going to order it by the city name, and then the last name and the first name. Your report viewers should be able to tell you what the best format for them is going to be, and that will allow you to determine what you're grouping by, and then what you're ordering by. So because each record is only returning the name, city, and zip in the detail band, I can go ahead and add the street address as well. I'll start by moving city over, because I want street to go before it. And now I have room to add my street. First thing I'm going to do is just a quick copy and paste of that label. Notice instead of using your mouse, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard for a little more precision movement. Double click that and call it street. If I was adding a new one, I could also have clicked on the A to add a text field, and that would have allowed me to create a new label as well. Now to add my database field, that's the A icon here with the stack behind it. And this is going into my detail band. It is my Argos data. And I'm going to add street 1. And again, just position it a little on in the form. So now we can, we've moved the labels down, and everything's looking aligned. Okay, column header, I don't need anymore, so I will delete that now. And the last thing I'll want to add is a total count for the number of addresses in each state, and the total number of addresses in the entire report. I'm going to start with the total, for which I need a summary band. This is added by adding a single band, and then change the type to be summary. And click OK. I'm going to rename this band so I know what it is. And we can see it's appearing above my child, under my child, sorry, but above the page footer. To count the total number of addresses, I'm going to use an expression again. Go into my expression builder, and I'm going to use a function. The function I'm going to use is count, because it will count each record being returned to the report. So at this point, the expression would only return the number of records. I want to add some wording into this. So we'll use total state count in a trailing space plus my count. Total state count, and then it's going to give me my number. Okay, and okay. And let's center this and auto size the width. And actually use these to center it in my summary band. So now I'm also going to add a count that's going to count each state. I can do that by copying my expression and putting it into my group footer. So I'm going to need to adjust my expression so it will only return an address count for one state. And I'll also want to use a state abbreviation instead of the full names. And I'll do this by adding, let's see, excuse me. So my expression is now going to be using database field, state, plus trailing or leading space, count plus count. Okay, so it is returning text 6, but that's just letting me know that that's where the database field is going to go, count and number. Okay, and okay. I need this to reset after print, so that after it does one band, it's going to reset the count back to 0. And okay. And let's save and preview. So now we can see my Arizona count of 1, British Columbia 2, California 12. And one thing I did miss actually is I'd rather like to know what state this is rather than just having it appear down there. So let's add an expression into my header to show my state. And let's make this a little bigger so it stands out. Expand the size of my band. And move my headers down a little. Much better. And we can see the count. If we jump to the last page, there's my total count of 100, which is what I'd specified here. If I set this to 0, that will return all records. 447. The next topic we're going to discuss is the library of objects. During building the banded report, we added the logo object from our report to our report by retrieving it from the library. But I'd also like to show you how to add objects to the library. We've created our report almost completely from scratch, but there are many elements on that report that we may want to use time and time again. Instead of recreating those objects every time we want to use them in a report, we could save them into the library of objects. You can save objects, bands, object groups, band groups, or even complete templates. So the first thing I'm going to do in my report, just to show you, is select my logo and click on the book icon with a plus beside it. This brings up the library of objects again. defaulting to my own folder. I would name the object. Give it a description. And clicking OK is going to save this into the library of objects. I don't need to save that in, so I'm just going to cancel out of it from that. You can create an object in the library of objects by selecting multiple objects, single bands, or multiple bands. You can also create a template that would contain preset fonts and images. For a template, we would recommend clearing any data that is related to a database, otherwise it will conflict with any data added by the user in the report wizard. To create a template, click in the margin to deselect any selections, and click to add into the library. You would then give your template a name, and a description so that others could know what it was, and click OK will add the entire template into the library of objects. One final thing I would like to point out is just this help icon at the top of Argos. This launches our in-product web help to explain the most commonly used functions in Argos, and pressing F1 at any time within the application will take you to the help as well. We have come to the end of the training. Before I close down the session, I would just like to bring up the eVisions knowledge base, which is very useful for new users. From the eVisions support site, I'll click on the knowledge base icon here. The knowledge base will help answer many common questions or issues. To use the knowledge base, you can scroll down the list of available articles. You can narrow by subcategory over on the right, or you can use the search bar to search for any errors or keywords you may have run into. Just as an example here, I want to run reports in Argos Web Viewer. Oops. Notice that it auto-populates with some suggestions, or I can just hit enter, and this will return everything that it's found. If you are running into any issues in Argos or any error messages, the knowledge base is a good place to come to try and resolve that issue. If you're a data block designer or an Argos administrator, please sign up for the appropriate trainings on our website. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you have a great day. If you have any further questions about anything we discussed in this training, please visit our in-product documentation, visit our knowledge base, or you can go through our support site to open a support ticket. One of our Argos analysts will be happy to assist you.